All praise and thanks belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May the peace and blessing of Allah be upon His servant and final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. As to our followers, my dear respected brothers in Islam, last week we went through the virtues and the merits of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, Jerusalem, in more comprehensive terms. And we discussed a couple of ayat in this and a couple of ahadith. And then we concluded by mentioning some fabricated ahadith that the people also have made up about Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. And we reach now to the point in where we'll discuss, inshallah ta'ala, the journey of Al-Isra Wal-Me'raj. Perhaps we'll only have time for the Isra only, and then maybe next week the Mi'raj story. We'll tell what the difference is. What is meant by Al-Isra, it comes from the word Sara Yasri, and Sara meaning to travel, and more specifically Sara meaning to travel at night. This is what it means, right? وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَسْرِ, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, Subhana alladhi asra bi'abdi laylan, right? Asra also, when it's used on its own like this, the word Asra by itself, when Allah Azza wa Jal says Subhana alladhi asra, meaning a part of the night. It means a part of the night and not complete and the full night. And this is from the miracle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave in Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So what is meant by Al-Isra is the journey from Makkah all the way to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. That's what is meant by Al-Isra. And what is meant by Al-Mi'raj is Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam going from Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa all the way and ascending into the levels of the heavens, meaning the prophets and so on, until he reaches Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to it. When we get to the Mi'raj part, we'll explain that story. The proof for the Isra is in Surah Al-Isra. Subhana alladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa. And the proof for the Mi'raj is from Surah Al-Najm, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ رَآهُ نَزْلَةً أُخْرَى عِنْدَ سِدْرَةِ الْمُنْتَهَى عِنْدَهَا جَنَّةُ الْمَأْوَى إِذْ يَغْشَى السِّدْرَةَ مَا يَغْشَى مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرُ وَمَا طَغَى لَقَدْ رَأَى مِنْ آيَاتِ رَبِّهِ الْكُبْرَى. Those ayat in Surah Al-Najm are the proof for the Mi'raj. Those ayat basically, they speak about the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam's second sighting of the angelic form of Jibreel alayhi salam. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam saw Jibreel in his angelic form only twice. So the ayat in Surah Al-Najm said, وَلَقَدْ رَآهُ نَزْلَةً أُخْرَى. He saw him a second time. And the second time he saw him in his angelical form was in the seventh sky. عِنْدَ سِدْرَةِ الْمُنْتَهَى. This is the lotus tree. We'll speak about that tree. عِنْدَهَا جَنَّةُ الْمَأْوَى. Right there is where Jannatul Ma'wa is. إِذْ يَغْشَى السِّدْرَةَ مَا يَغْشَى مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرُ وَمَا طَغَى. This is where Jibreel alayhi salam stopped, and he said to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I can't pass this, you need to go on your own. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would take Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam all the way until he meets Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah azza wa jal gives him the commandment and the obligation of a salat. And then there's a discussion whether he saw Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not. When we get there, inshallah, we'll explain that kind of discussion. Now, Al-Isra Wal-Me'raj is a story and an event that is agreed upon by Ummah al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. There are some people, but this is from the munafiqun, that believe this did not exist altogether and it's a fabrication, right? But the vast majority, and this is unanimous agreement, that this kind of trip occurred during the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. When did Al-Isra Wal-Me'raj happen? When did it take place? There is no doubt that it took place after Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam returned from his trip to Al-Ta'if, from his da'wah trip to Al-Ta'if. You know that story, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam ends up in Al-Ta'if after the people of Makkah rejected him and had nothing to do, didn't want to have anything to do with his da'wah message. So he goes to Al-Ta'if, they also reject him as well. Very sadly, the year before that, Aisha radiallahu or Khadija radiallahu anha had died, or Abu Talib had died. Aam al-Huzn, it was known as the year of grief. And these people have rejected him. So immediately after this, now Allahu Alam exactly what year this happened, but there is no doubt that it happened after Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam returned from Al-Ta'if. Some say that it happened 3 years before the Hijrah, and some say it happened 1 year before the Hijrah. It doesn't matter, whenever it happened, but it did happen after Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam returned from Al-Ta'if. And why did it happen? This Isra Wal-Me'raj happened, it was as a gift from Allah to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to comfort his heart. That look how much rejection has happened so far. The people of Makkah have rejected him. The people of Al-Ta'if have rejected him. Not only that, abused him, swore at him, slandered him, and they actually physically tortured him and threw stones at him. So this is the worst kind of rejection that a person can see from his people. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to comfort the heart of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he made this journey for him, Al-Isra Wal-Me'raj, in where Allah Azza wa Jal wanted to meet him, show him other prophets that support him, that encourage him, that acknowledge he is their leader. He would go up to the heavens. Allah Azza wa Jal would say to him that if the people of the earth have rejected you, then the people of the sky have opened their arms for you, and they have all acknowledged you, and they all understand your importance and your significance and how beloved you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah Azza wa Jal will make you an imam of all the prophets. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take you up level by level. That Allah Azza wa Jal will take you to somewhere even Jibreel wasn't able to go. This is how much love Allah Azza wa Jal has for you. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala proved that for him in this journey of Al-Isra Wal-Me'raj, which would re-energize the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam once again to go back to his people in Makkah. This is after his return, and begin to preach to them, and increase in his preaching after that. For this was part of the wisdom for why this journey, this entire journey of Al-Isra Wal-Me'raj was set up. Now Al-Isra Wal-Me'raj, the other discussion that comes with this, did it happen body and soul, or was it only a journey of the soul? This is also a discussion. Well, of course, the correct opinion is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala journeyed with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, took him from Makkah to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and up to the heavens, body and soul. Body and soul. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi. Bi'abdihi. Well, a abd is not a abd unless he's a body and soul in front of it. Allah Azza wa Jal did not say Subhanalladhi asra biruhi abdihi, with the soul of his slave. He did not say that. So he said bi'abdihi. The fact that he said bi'abdihi, we understand from that body and soul. Then the other thing is, as Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he mentions, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began the ayah by saying Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi. All praise belongs to Allah. We declare the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who journeyed and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam from Makkah to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. For Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he said, if Allah Azza wa Jal had taken only his soul, then what's incredible about that for the ayah to start with Subhana? The word Subhanallah is only used, that's said when something incredible happens, when something of a miraculous event of nature happens, right? So this kind of event that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes body and soul, it's an incredible kind of event that Allah Azza wa Jal began the ayah by saying, Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram. The other thing, there was a dabba, there was a Buraq. What would be the point of the Buraq if the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is going to be journeyed only by his soul? There wouldn't be a need for a creature for him to knock on and for it to take him. So Al-Buraq being there is a proof as well that the Buraq, it needs someone to go on it. It is there so someone can mount on it with his body. For Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was taken body and soul. Hatta in Surah Al-Isra, Allah Azza wa Jal would say, وَمَا جَعَلْنَا الرُّؤْيَا الَّتِي أَرَيْنَاكَ. Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about what Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saw during his trip from Makkah to Al-Bayt Al-Maqdis. He called it Al-Ru'ya Allati Araynak. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرُ وَمَا طَغَى. That your eyesight did not deviate, didn't move left or right. It was focused on what Allah Azza wa Jal wanted it to see. Now, what am I saying this? Because the eye is an organ of the body. The eye is not an organ of the soul. So Allah Azza wa Jal, even in other places of the Quran, mentions that the eye of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw. And so the soul does not have an eye. The eye is for the body itself. فالصحيح here is that the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was taken from Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, from Makkah to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, body and soul. Now, the Isra Wal-Me'raj, of course, this event happened only once in the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You'll find other opinions that mention it happened more than once. All of that is fabricated, has nothing to do with the truth. Really, it only happened once in the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Okay, now the actual story of Al-Isra. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he mentions the story by himself, and he mentions it, narrates it to the companions. He says, بينما أنا في الحطيم وربما قال في الحجر مضطجعا إذ أتاني آت فقمته. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, just one normal night, ordinary night, I was sleeping in the house of Hani. That was his house. And this house is in Shi'bi Abi Talib. Yani it's away from the Kaaba. And Jibreel alayhi salam came to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he took him from an opening in the roof. He took him from the house of Hani, and he took him all the way until he reached the Kaaba. And then he put him where the Kaaba was. When Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, وَكُنْتُ بَيْنَ الْيَقَظَانِ وَالنَّائِمِ. Yani he was half awake, half sleepy, right? He was just being taken out of his house during the night when he was asleep. And he was placed right next to the Kaaba. فَذَنْ Jibreel alayhi salam, and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, فَشَقَّ مَا بَيْنَ هَذَا إِلَى هَذَا. Then Jibreel alayhi salam opened me from here to here. Now what's this from here to here? Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, مِنْ ثُغْرَةِ نَحْرِهِ إِلَى شَعْرَتِهِ. Al-Ulama rahimahumullah, they say that Jibreel alayhi salam opened Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam from here, from this opening here, right here. He was opened from here all the way until where the pubic hair is, right there, ila sha'd al-aina. This was the opening. It's an incredible opening. It wasn't only the chest from here to here, it was the entire thing with the belly even being open all the way until the end. And he opened it, فَاسْتَخْرَجَ قَلْبِي. He took out my heart. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is awake. We can see all this. ثُمَّ أُتِيَ بِطَسْطٍ مِّن ذَهَبٍ مَمْلُوءَةٍ إِيمَانًا. Then Jibreel alayhi salam brought a vessel, kind of like a jug, and it was made of gold, and it was filled Iman. Now all of this is miracles that are happening. How it's filled Iman? There's some kind of thing inside that is considered and called Iman. فَغَسَلَ قَلْبِي. It was kind of like a fluid because he washed his heart. ثُمَّ حُشِي. And then حُشِيَ, in other words, it was stuffed inside. And Jibreel alayhi salam stuffed inside of the arteries, as the ulama rahimahullah say, fi uruqi, stuffed inside of the arteries of the heart, this wisdom and this Iman. ثُمَّ أُعِيد. Then he put it back in and he stitched him up, حتى even to the point where one of the companions, Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu, I believe it was, in Al-Madinah, he used to say, لا أزال أرى أثر المخيط في صدري, that I still saw the stitch marks on Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam's chest. This was an actual live operation that actually happened right besides the Kaaba. Everyone is sleeping, only Jibreel wa Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam are awake at that time. ثُمَّ أُعِيد ثُمَّ أُتِيَ بِدَابَّةٍ دُونَ الْبَغْلِ وَفَوْقَ الْحِمَارِ أَبْيَضًا. And then everything was placed back, and all of a sudden there was a creature that came, a dabba, and that was Al-Buraq. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, دُونَ الْبَغْلِ فَوْقَ الْحِمَارِ. It was just smaller than a mule and bigger than a donkey. Now you know what is the mule? The mule is an animal that is a cross between the horse and the donkey. So it's the male donkey that breeds with the female horse, and as a result comes a bakhr, comes a mule. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions this creature in the Quran, al-khayla wal-bighana wal-hamir. Wal-baghl, of course, it outlives the donkey and the horse, and it grows stronger than them, and it can work until the last day of its life. Al-baghl is kind of smaller than a horse, and the size of the donkey. So in between that, would be the size of this Buraq, Abyad, and it was absolutely white, without any dot on it of blackness or any other pattern or color. It was white. So then Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, يَضَعُ خَطْوَهُ عِنْدَ أَقْصَى طَرَفِهِ. That the one step of this Buraq is as far as the eye can see. Wherever the eye can see, that's one step, he gets there. So you can understand how speed and how quick this Buraq is. And this is why it was called Al-Buraq. Al-Buraq comes from the word Barq. Barq literally means a lightning bolt, right? And in the hadith he mentions that lahu lama'ad. It has like a lightning bolt that strikes, that comes out of it as it walks, right? As it runs. So it was called Al-Buraq, coming from the word Barq, which means lightning bolt, describing its speed, right? So it was called Al-Buraq. فالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, he says, in the narration, he says, فَلَمَّا أَرَادَ النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم أَنْ يَرْكَبَهُ. When the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم wanted to mount Al-Buraq, استصعب عليه. The Buraq, it began to shake, and it became terrified, and he started moving. فقال جبريل, النبي جبريل عليه السلام, he said to the Buraq, أبي محمد تفعل هذا? Now the time of Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم, you're acting up like this? What this implies is that this Buraq, is not only a creature that carried the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Al-Buraq is a creature that carried every single prophet to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. Every prophet has been to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, and the way they got there is on Al-Buraq. So this Buraq began to hesitate and started shaking and moving, because since the last prophet was on it, it has been a very long time, which was Isa alayhi salam, as the ulama rahimahullah mentioned. So from Isa alayhi salam until that lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's been a very long time. Al-Buraq is not used to, it's been a very long time since someone has mounted his back. So Jibreel alayhi salam, he said to him, now the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you're acting up all like this. فَمَا رَكِبَكَ أَحَدٌ أَكْرَمُ عَلَى اللَّهِ مِنْهُ. There has been no one that is going to mount your back more honorable than Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. قَالَ فَارْفَضَّ عَرَقًا. So when the Buraq heard this, it shaped and it was sweating, and then once it sweat, cooled and calmed down, then the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam mounted this Buraq. فَرَكِبَهُ أي البراق حتى أتيت بيت المقدس فربطته بحلقة التي يربط بها الأنبياء ثم دخلت المسجد فصليت فيه ركعتين ثم خرجت. For then the narration, it mentions that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam mounted Al-Buraq, and Al-Buraq, obviously, before it took him to the Masjid Al-Aqsa, I'll tell you what happened, but let's just finish this narration. It took him to the Masjid Al-Aqsa, and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says, I came off it and I tied it to a halaqa, to a ring. This is called Ha'itul Buraq. It's called, there's a wall there. This wall, it's split in half as the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam got to it, and a chain, iron ring came out, and he tied it there. Now, why did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tie al-Buraq? This Buraq, it's a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is commanded. Why tie it? Where is it going to run away at? He took the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Makkah until it reached the Bayt al-Maqdis, and he only did this because of a commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tying something, when you tie an animal, meaning you fee for it to run away. So why did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tie it when he really isn't afraid of it running away? He knows that this is being commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it to do such a journey. Why? Al-ulama rahimahumullah, they say that the wisdom behind the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam tying al-Buraq to that ring is because every prophet before him tied it to that ring as well. Just like Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, فَرَبَطَهُ بِالْحَلْقَةِ الَّتِي يَرْبِطُ بِهَا الْأَنْبِيَاء. He tied it to the ring that the prophets before him used to tie it to. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he does that, what is he teaching us? He's teaching us that I am no different to the prophets before me, that I carry the same message, and I carry the same intentions, and I carry the same da'wah as the prophets before me. And they tied the Buraq. I'm going to do the same thing, because all of us prophets are brothers, and all of us prophets carry the same message, and we preach the same message, and we worship the same illal, and we do the same things. So he tied him, and that tying of the Buraq, its implication is that I am no different to the prophets before. And then when he headed towards al-Masjid, he prayed 2 rak'at in there, and he led the prophets in salat. This is kind of, what does that imply? When he led the prophets in salat, this is an implication that all the prophets have now acknowledged Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam's position among them, and that he leads them, and him leading the prophets is an implication that the other prophets' message and their sharia has been overridden, and it has been abrogated, and now the one to be followed is Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So this is why there was a lot of importance for Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam to end up in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa at pray there. Otherwise, it would have been very simple for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam from the Kaaba straight up to the heavens. That could have happened. But the reason for going from Al-Kaaba all the way to Al-Bayt Al-Maqdis is for all these meanings to appear. That the Buraq is being tied, which is him following the prophets before, and that it's all the same message. That's also for the Jews and for the Christians later on in his life to see that look what he did, nothing different to the prophets before. So if you people are followers, true followers of Isa alayhi salam, true followers of Musa alayhi salam, then you'd follow his message, because he did exactly what they did. And when he led them in salat, this is an implication as well, that now he is in charge of mankind and he leads mankind. So in Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in the narration when he continues, he mentions that when he got onto Al-Buraq and started heading towards Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, that he seen things. Allah Azza wa Jal showed him things on the way before he got to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. Very quickly, inshallah ta'ala, we'll mention the things he saw and we'll end with that. The first thing Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saw, as mentioned the hadith, وَرَأَ الدَّجَّالِ. He saw الدَّجَّال. فِي صُورَتِهِ رُؤْيَ الْعَيْنِ. He saw him exactly as he is with his eyes. These are all, now you need to understand. The journey is a miraculous journey. So everything that's going to happen is miraculous. There's nothing that you need to understand how. Logically, it doesn't make sense. Everything here makes sense. Then it's all miraculous. رأى الدجال في صورته رؤيا العين. He saw الدجال. فسئل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الدجال. Later on, when he told his companions he saw الدجال, they asked him, give us a description of الدجال. فالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, رأيته فيلميا. I saw him as a huge creation. أقمر هجالا, meaning he was fully white. His color was white. إحدى عينيه قائمة. One of his eyes was healthy. كأنها كوكب دري, like a shining star. Because the Dajjal has two eyes. One eye that is perfectly healthy, he can see with it, and the other one like a grape, like a over-ripened grape, like a sultanate. It's coming out of his eye, and he can't see with it. It doesn't function. كأن شعر رأسه أغصان شجرة. And the hair on his head, it's as though the branches of a tree. It comes out like the branches of a tree. This is what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saw in his journey. He saw Ad-Dajjal himself. Now the second thing that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saw, he said, وَسَارَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ فَإِذَا هُوَ بِعَجُوزٍ عَلَى جَانِبِ الطَّرِيقِ. As he is on the way, he saw an old woman on the side of the path. He's got a special path that he's going to. On that path, on the side of it, he saw an old woman. فَإِذَا أَنَا بِامْرَأَةٍ حَاسِرَةٍ عَنْ ذِرَاعِهَا. Then he described this woman, that she had uncovered her arms. Her arms were uncovered like this. وَعَلَيْهَا مِنْ كُلِّ زِينَةٍ خَلَقَهَا اللَّهُ. And on the arms, there is so much zina. There is so much beauty and jewelry and so on her arms. فَقَالَتْ يَا مُحَمَّدْ أَنظِرْنِي أَسْأَلُكَ. She began to say, Muhammad, wait, I want to come, I want to ask you something. فَلَمْ أَلْتَفِتْ إِلَيْهَا. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, I did not turn to her. وَلَمْ أَقُمْ عَلَيْهَا. And I didn't stop for her. He continued. فَقَالَ صلى الله عليه وسلم مَا هَذَا يَا جِبْرِيلُ. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam asked Jibreel, who's that? فجبريل said to him, Sir ya Muhammad, keep going, let's go. Later on, فَسَارَ مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ أَنْ يَسِيرُ. So he continued his journey. فَإِذَا شَيْءٌ يَدْعُوهُ مُتَنَحِّيًا عَنِ الطَّرِيقِ. As he continued his journey, there was something else that was calling him on the side of the road. So this thing that was calling him, it was saying, هَلُمَّ يَا Muhammad, come here Muhammad. فقال جبريل سر يا محمد فسار ما شاء الله أن يسير. For Jibreel, he said to him, keep on going. For he continued to go until whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed for him to continue. حتى انتهى إلى بيت المقدس, until he reached the Bayt al-Maqdis. This is in the narration. Otherwise, he saw other things which you mentioned, but let's see what happened here. فقال له جبريل. Then Jibreel, he said to him, أما العجوز التي رأيت في جانب الطريق. That old woman that you saw on the side of the road, فلم يبق من الدنيا إلا ما بقي من عمرها. He said that woman there was a symbolical representation of this worldly life, and because she's an old woman, how long is left from her life is exactly how long is left from the life of this dunya. So in other words, an old woman, how much do you expect from her to live? Another few years, These few years is exactly the life of what is left from this worldly life, from this dunya. And he said, وَأَمَّا الَّذِي أَرَادَ أَن تَمِيلَ إِلَيْهِ. And as for the other one that was calling you towards him, فَذَاكَ عَدُوُّ اللَّهِ إِبْلِيسَ أَرَادَ أَن تَمِيلَ إِلَيْهِ. That was Iblis himself. He wanted you to come towards him, to come towards the dunya. For Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was shown in this trip the reality of the dunya, that you see the reality of it. Why was it considered an old woman with a lot of jewelry on its hands? In other words, a dunya really in its essence, rubbish. There is nothing left of it. It's about to end. But what attracts the people to it is what's on its arms, right? Even though the people know the reality of what it is, but it means some kind of strength in iman and belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promises, and that what Allah Azza wa Jal has better than what this worldly life can ever offer, for someone to not be distracted by this fitna. For this is exactly what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saw. Or Iblis would call him a second time, come towards this dunya, come towards this dunya. When Jibreel alayhi salam would say to him, continue, just like Jibreel alayhi salam said to him, continue, this is the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also for us in this life, that we in this world, the life are travelers, right? As the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, kun fi dunya gharib aw abiru sabil. So we're travelers. And on this travel, we see these decorations. We see this old woman with this kind of jewelry on her head. And we are being called by this Iblis which is about to come. What do we do in a position like this? How do we respond? We respond with these same words that Jibreel gave the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and that is what? Sir, keep on going, continue, keep on going, until eventually you reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam made it to the other side, and he wasn't harmed by the distractions of this worldly life. The other thing that the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saw in this journey, as he was journeying, he said, وجد في طريقه إلى بيت المقدس ريح قبر ماشطة بنت فرعون. Now you know Fir'aun, he had daughters, and he went and hired a servant, a woman, just special to comb the hair of his daughters. That's all. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, I came past the grave of this woman that used to comb the hairs of the daughters of Fir'aun, and I smelt the beautiful fragrance and scent that was coming out from her grave. So then Jibreel alayhi salam, he said to him, this is the smell of the woman that used to comb the daughters of Fir'aun. For then Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to him, and who's this lady? وَمَا شَأْنُهَا? This is where the story of that lady came. It was during the Isra Wal-Me'raj. So Jibreel alayhi salam, he said to him, alright, this is the story. That one day she was doing her job. So she came that morning to comb the hairs of the daughters of Fir'aun, and سقط المدى, meaning the comb, it fell from her hand. So she went down and picked it up, and before she picked it up, she said Bismillah, and she picked it up. So the daughter of Fir'aun realized, and she said to him, Abi, yani you mean Bismillah, Allah, meaning my father? So the woman, she said, no. ولكن ربي ورب أبيك Allah. Your Lord and my Lord and the Lord of your dad is Allah. So the daughter of Fir'aun, she said, أخبره بذلك, shall I inform him of this? قالت نعم. The daughter said, go inform him. فأخبرته فدعاها. So the daughter of Fir'aun went to her father, and she said, look, this lady that you got, she bent down and she said Bismillah, and her Allah is someone else, it's not you. So Fir'aun, he called this woman and he said to her, Ya fulana, وَإِنَّ لَكِ رَبًّا غَيْرِي? Do you have a Lord other than me? He wants to verify it. Do you have a Lord other than myself? So she said, Naam, Rabbi wa Rabbuk Allah. My Lord and your Lord is Allah. Shuf, subhanallah. Yani this is her da'wah. What is it? One word. Her da'wah is one word, literally the word Allah. That's what her da'wah was. And to the point where look how much honor Allah Azza wa Jal gave this woman, to the point when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam smelt her fragrance from the grave. And it was so important that he had to know about her story. And he narrates it to us, and until this day we share her story. Look at this, you learn from this story that a person rises, levels, and ranks with Allah through his da'wah to the people. And it could be the simplest of things. Rabbi wa Rabbuka illal Allah, that's it. So, فَأَمَرَ بِنُقْرَةٍ. So Fir'aun, because of that, he got really angry, frustrated. So he wants to do some kind of torture towards her. So he commanded that a large pot made of copper was brought, and basically, it was put on the fire, and there was oil or whatever, something was put in there that was flammable and really hot. And he commanded her to throw her kids in there. فَقَالَتْ لَهُ إِنَّ لِي إِلَيْكَ حَاجَةً. She said, wait, before I do that, I have a request. He said, what's your request? What do you want? She said, I want that after we all die, take all of our boats and put them in one piece of clothing, and tie it and put us all in one grave. So he said to her, لَكِ ذَلِكَ. No worries, we'll do that for you. So فَأَمَرَ بِأَوْنَادِهَا فَأُلْقُوا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهَا وَاحِدًا وَاحِدًا. So Fir'aun, he released that kind of command and this instruction, and he said to the army, take her kids one after the other and throw them in that pot. And they would take one kid and throw it, take the other and throw it, take the third and throw it. حَتَّى انْتَهَى إِلَى صَبِيٍّ لَهَا مُرْضِعًا. Until it was the moment, there was one more kid, and this kid was still breastfeeding, yani newborn. فَكَأَنَّهَا تَقَاعَسَتْ مِنْ أَجْلِهِ. She began to hesitate at this moment. Yani subhanallah, Allah Azza wa Jal had given her tough and strong iman. Her kids are being thrown, And when it came to this kid, she kind of stressed out a little bit. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as a mercy from Allah Azza wa Jal towards this woman, He allowed this little child to speak, and He said, يَا أُمَّهُ اقْتَحِمِي فَإِنَّ عَذَابَ الدُّنْيَا أَهْوَنُ مِنْ عَذَابِ الْآخِرَةِ فَاقْتَحَمَا. So then this kid, he spoke and he said, "Oh mother, throw yourself, for the punishment of this worldly life is much easier than the punishment of the hereafter." So then she threw herself, her and her child, and she went into this fire. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he says that only 4 spoke when they were young boys. It was this daughter of Fir'aun, the daughter of the one that combed the hair of the daughters of Fir'aun. She spoke, Ushahidu Yusuf, the witness of Yusuf alayhi salam's episode, or Sahibu Jurayj wa Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam. Only 4 spoke when they were still in that age of the cradle. This was her story, and she threw herself and they all burned. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised her a rank above what He raised mankind. Of course, in the sense that she was, her story was mentioned to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it was taught to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it became a source of guidance for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it became, you need to understand the relevance of this story to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's on this journey of Al-Isra, and on his journey, remember we said that this journey is happening after they kicked him out after his people, Quraysh and Ta'if, rejected his message and him altogether. So when he goes past this grave, he kind of, he takes a lesson from this, that it's not him the only one that was tortured fi sabilillah, that there were way before him people that came, people that are uneven known. Who knows this word other than this hadith mentioning it? A normal, simple woman that just said Bismillah, and she was tortured because of this. For this served as a great inspiration for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he's experienced the same thing from his people. Imagine now on the road how much this boosts his confidence, and how much it makes him energized and ready to go back to his people and continue ad-da'wah fi sabilillah. You need to understand some of these things as they're happening, miracles that he's seeing, but purposely Allah Azza wa Jal wants him to see these kind of things. The other thing that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, that he saw رَأَى حَالَ الْمُجَاهِدِينَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. He saw the condition and the state of the mujahideen fi sabilillah. How did he see it? He said, as I'm on my way to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, he said, I saw قَوْمٌ يَزْرَعُونَ فِي يَوْمٍ وَيَحْصُدُونَ فِي يَوْمٍ. I saw people planting seeds, and they were harvesting the crops on the same day. How quick is that? You plant a seed, and the same day it has already grown to full size, and it's already bearing fruit, and now people are harvesting. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Ya Jibreel, man ha'ula? O Jibreel, who are these people? For Jibreel alayhi salam, he said to him, هؤلاء المجاهدون في سبيل الله تضاعف لهم الحسنات ب700 ضعف وما أنفقوا من شيء فهو يخلفه وهو خير الرازقين. Jibreel alayhi salam, he said that's the condition of the mujahideen, that Allah Azza wa Jal has multiplied their reward by 700, so much that the multiplication of reward they earn is similar to a person planting a seed in the earth and then harvesting it the same day. How quick is that? How quick is that? How long does it take for a seed to be planted, for it to be watered, for it to grow, to be exposed to sunlight, to keep on growing, to continue growing to full size, and then to bear its fruit, and then for the fruit to ripen, and then for the right time to be? Now, this is months. This all happened in one day. This is like Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, this is how Allah multiplies the reward of the mujahideen. Very quick for what he has done fi sabilillah, right? وَهُوَ خَيْرُ الرَّازِقِينَ. Allah Azza wa Jal multiplies for whoever He wants. Then the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, and as I'm on the road, I saw قَوْمٌ تُرْضَخُ رُؤُوسُهُمْ بِالْحَجَرِ. And I saw people that were laying down and their heads were being smashed with a boulder. And every time it was smashed, it would come back, the pieces would come back, make the head once again, and the stone would be thrown once again. لا يفتر عنهم من ذلك شيء. It just doesn't stop. It's continuous. فقلت يا جبريل من هؤلاء? And who is with Jibreel? He says to him, who are these people? فجبريل says, هؤلاء الذين تتثاقل رؤوسهم عن الصلاة. These are the people that neglect and abandon as-salat. What's meant by salat here is the obligatory prayers. Subhanallah. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is seeing the punishment of the one who neglects the salat before the salat is being obligated. It's the salat hasn't been obligated yet. It's going to be obligated in the trip of when he goes up Al-Me'raj to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he is seeing the punishment before the salat is being obligated. So what this teaches us is that when we teach a salat to someone, we're supposed to teach them firstly of the benefits of a salat, and we're also supposed to warn them of what it means if you neglect the salat. Now that kind of fear is supposed to be instilled, then the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is being shown the consequence of missing the salat before he's being told pray. Yani this is kind of like instilling fear that don't you dare to leave out your salat, because this would be the ending. A stone would be thrown on this person until the day of judgment, until he's resurrected. And then the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said that on the road I saw رجلا قد جمع حزمة حطب عظيمة. I saw a person, he was carrying a lot of logs, timber, he was carrying it. لا يستطيع حملها. He can barely carry it. وهو يريد أن يزيد عليها, and he still wants more logs. Well, he can't even carry what's in his hand, and he still wants more on top of that. For Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he says, ما هذا يا جبريل? What's going on here? Who's this person? So Jibreel alayhi salam, he said, هذا الرجل من أمتك تكون عنده أمانات الناس لا يقدر على أدائها وهو يريد أن يحمل عليها. He said, this is a person from your nation that carries the responsibilities of people, right? Yeah, he carries responsibilities of people. مثلا, there's a debt, he owes someone money, right? وهو يريد أن يحمل عليها. He's already struggling with the responsibility he has, and he wants to carry on more on himself, right? So he owes this guy something, and he owes him something, and he owes something, and he's going to someone else to carry some more load and a burden on top of him. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, in other words, he's being told that such a person is this is not recommended of a state of a person, that he carries above whatever load he already has. Well, the believer, whatever he has of responsibility of the people, must strive in full effort to return that responsibility towards them before he goes and carries some other responsibility. The other thing that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saw in this trip, a few more and we finish inshallah, مر على قوم تقرض ألسنتهم وشفاههم بمقاريض من نار. He saw people, their tongues and their lips were being cut with scissors made of fire. بمقاريض من نار, kind of like a cutting tool made from the fire. So then the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and لا يفتر عنه, it's continued. It's like this, then everything comes back together and it's cut once again. فالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم says, يا جبريل من هؤلاء? Who are these people? والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, Jibreel عليه السلام, he says, هؤلاء خطباؤك من أمتك. These are people that give khutbah in your nation. يأمرون الناس بالبر وينسون أنفسهم وهم يتلون الكتاب أفلا يعقلون. These are people that command the people to do the good, and they forget themselves, and they read the book and they know the deed, and they don't understand anything from it, and they don't implement anything from it. For kind of something very serious, that when someone advises someone with something, you need to understand that the closest ears to your advice or your ears before the person's ear. And what that means, it obligates on you to follow your own advice before you give people advice to others. And this is what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saw, people giving advice to others, not caring about their state, not caring about following that advice, and they'll be running from one person to another, giving him that kind of advice. When Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, on this trip, he also saw مررت على حجر صغير يخرج منه ثور عظيم. I came by and I saw a hole, an opening in earth, like a little cave, and I saw a huge bull coming out of it, and he tried to go back in, but he couldn't go back in. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he says, Ya Jibreel, man hada? What's that? For Jibreel alayhi salam, he says, this is the example of a man in your nation that speaks a huge word, and then he regrets it and he cannot retrieve it. Just like the bull can't go back. This is a person that spoke a word and he regrets it. I shouldn't have said that, but too late. What are you going to regret? It's out. This is why Umar radiallahu anhu used to say, I wish I had a long neck so that I have more time to think of whether I should say this word or not. As the word travels until it comes out from his tongue, he says, at least I have that time to rethink whether I should swallow that word or continue and take it out. This is Umar radiallahu anhu's Umar radiallahu anhu was desiring this. فيعني serious hadith والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, as in the hadith he says, وإن العبد لا يتكلم بكلمة من سخط الله لا يلقي لها بالا تهوي به في النار 70 خريفا. That a person might say a word and he speaks this word and it displeases Allah, and he doesn't even recognize and realize, it's not even he, لا يلقي لها بالا, but it would be the reason for why he's thrown in Jahannam. يهوي بها في النار 70 years because of this one word. فيعني what we learn from this, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was taught during this trip how يعني the words and what you're supposed to weigh of your words and what you say, whether it's يعني to people that are close in your family, whether it's to others, whether it's to strangers, whoever it is. Notice anyway, يعني too late, regret what? And especially when you continuously say these kind of words and you say, no, Allah, sorry man, forgive me this time, Allah, I didn't mean it. And then again you do the same thing, forgive me, Allah, I didn't mean it. يعني when are you gonna learn? For you need to understand the seriousness and the danger of saying a word that is bad. This is what happens to such a person. When Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was shown this in his travel. When Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said as well, that مر بقبر موسى وهو يصلي. He passed by the grave of Musa alayhi salam while Musa alayhi salam was standing and praying. Look how many things يعني with the salat that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saw. All this is preparing him for this obligatory act of a salat. When Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said to the companions that أتيت أو مررت على موسى ليلة أسري بي عند الكثيب الأحمر وهو قائم يصلي في قبره. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he actually identified the grave of Musa alayhi salam and he said it's عند الكثيب الأحمر. الكثيب الأحمر meaning الكثيب is sand dunes. Al-Ahmar, the red, يعني the red sand dunes. يعني subhanAllah, when we were there, as we left يعني Jerusalem heading towards Jordan, we passed by Al-Kathib Al-Ahmar. Kathib Al-Ahmar is a huge area. You'll just see it يعني miles and miles as far as the eye can see. It is mountains, red, and the soil of it is red. Somewhere there, Musa alayhi salam is buried. Musa alayhi salam is still standing in his grave praying. Allahu A'lam how, but يعني Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentions this in the hadith. This is the love that Musa alayhi salam had for salat, that Allah Azza wa Jalla even extended this kind of worship even in his grave. This is what Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saw. After this, he reached Baytul Maqdis, he reached Masjid Al-Aqsa, and he entered and he prayed 2 rak'at. He said, فَالْتَفَتْتُ ثُمَّ الْتَفَتْ, meaning I turned my head and I turned my head. What does that mean? Meaning he gave salam and he realized that the prophets were all behind him praying. He realized that the prophets were all behind him praying. Now, someone can say that, how did he pray Iman when a salat hasn't even been obligated yet? Then he didn't receive the command of salat. Some ulama, rahimahumullah, they reckon and they assume, that this is their opinion, that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he lent the prophets in prayer after he came down from the sky, not before. So they say that after he came down from the sky, now he's received the commandment of a salat, and it was at night, so it's come close towards the Fajr time. So he prayed illal and Fajr, which makes sense because the others in the narration says 2 rak'at. Well, Fajr is 2 rak'at. He led them in that and they prayed behind him. Now that's weak opinion, right? Because we know that the first salat the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam prayed was Salat al-Dhuhr, also Salat al-Fajr. And let's answer from the sense that they say, okay, salat was only obligated and commanded after he went up. Well, that doesn't mean that there was no salat before that. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he ascended to Allah, he received the 5 obligatory prayers. But before that, there was salat. There was salat al-layl, qum al-layla illa qalila. The people knew how to pray. Well, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would pray, right? But it makes so wallahu a'lam, as-sahih is that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he led the prophets in salat as soon as he arrived at Masjid Al-Aqsa, before he went up to the heavens. And he led them with ulama rahimahumullah. There's one more issue to mention, and that is, were they there body and soul, or were they only there as a soul? For ulama rahimahullah, to answer that, they say that Allah Azza wa Jal brought all the prophets as a soul there, and he created for them new bodies that are exactly similar to their bodies that are in the graves. So the original body of that prophet was still where it is buried in the grave, or like Isa alayhi salam was still in the sky, or Idris still in the sky, and the prophets that were behind him were given a body that Allah had created that is similar to their body, and their actual soul was in that body. When Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam led them in salat, and then after this, after he led them in salat, this is where Jibreel took by his hand until they reached the mount, and then from there they ascended to the heavens. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to speak about this in next week, the story of Al-Mi'raj. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.